Hello, everyone, and welcome to Knowing Real Estate with the Pozzi Group. My name is Alan Pozzi, and I'm your host today with my co-host, Art Meister. Art, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Alan. How about you?
Oh, man, I couldn't be any better. And as anybody in real estate knows, and some people that aren't even in real estate, we've all heard of or we've all seen articles about the big NAR lawsuit and, of course, the NAR settlement that happened about a week and a half ago. And one of the things that we want to talk about today, and we're going to talk a lot about this without saturating the topic because there's all kinds of misinformation out there. But one of the things we want to talk about today, Art and I wanted to talk about today, is really what are the four options any buyer has in today's market as it stands right now. And so, so let's talk about those four options. How do you feel about that today, Art?
I think that's a great topic.
I think it is too. So first of all, let's talk about the first option that any buyer has. The first option any buyer has is they can do it themselves, right, Art?
Sure.
And you think that's a wise decision for a buyer?
Well, I personally don't. I have done transactions by myself before I got my real estate license, and I messed up one or two.
Absolutely. And even for newly licensed real estate agents, when you see that TREC promulgated contract, it's hard to navigate that thing and understand what all those different paragraphs require and understand the timelines in the contract and all those kind of things. And, it's really a difficult process to navigate. And knowing how, what option periods are, knowing when documents are due to the title company, knowing when earnest money is due to the title company, things like that are very difficult for a licensee to figure out, much less somebody who's unrepresented and standing alone, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and I'd say also that when you miss one of those deadlines, you have no idea the complications that can happen and what will go on with the transaction from there.
Absolutely, and that can be real difficult for a buyer, and it could even lead to a default in the sale of the home itself, in a sales contract itself. So let's talk about option number two for a buyer, because let's say a buyer doesn't want to work with the transaction itself. So the buyer says, you know what, I don't need a buyer's agent. I'm not going to pay a commission to a buyer's agent. I'm just going to work with the listing agent. I'm going to work with the guy that represents the seller, the seller's agent. How do you feel about that type of representation, Art?
Well, actually, there is no representation if that happens, and that would be the major point. The listing agent is responsible first to his seller, and therefore the buyer would have essentially no ability to use the agent when it comes to negotiating the transaction.
Absolutely. And really the only thing the seller's agent fiduciary duty, according to the listing agreement, is obviously to the seller. And only thing they owe the buyer is full disclosure and honesty and fairness. They really don't owe any type of fiduciary duty to the buyer, rather. And so if I'm working with the seller, my loyalty is to the seller, not to the buyer. And so that could be difficult for the buyer to have any type of representation and understanding of what's going on. If they have a question about timelines, if they have a question about if they have questions about negotiation, they can't go to the seller's agent and go, well, you have the home listed for $300,000. Should I offer $290,000? What do you think the seller's agent's going to say?
Well, he may say, you're going to need to write a contract, and then they've got to put that together. And the other thing is, what kind of marketing report are you going to get? And what kind of comps are you going to be able to run yourself? So can you get the market data to support the price you're willing to offer? That's
right. Or how do you even know if that listing agent has listed the home at the right market value? You don't know that. And so representation is really required in that perspective. So let's scratch out option number two, working with the seller's agent. So let's go to option number three. And this is probably the most expensive option, or could be the most expensive option. I'm just going to hire an attorney. Well, a lot of problems with that, isn't there, Art?
Yeah, good for you. Hire an attorney. And let's see how long the clock will run until your money runs out. My guess is you're probably going to have to put up a retainer.
Yep. How much is a retainer fee, Art?
That might be somewhere between $3,000, $5,000, $6,000, I think, for a real estate transaction.
I would imagine so. Attorneys don't come cheap, do they?
No, and if I were an attorney, I would certainly lay that down right out of the gate.
Yep.
So you've got to post that initially before the work begins. Then your next task is going to be, when you call that attorney, that clock is ticking. And when the attorney
Absolutely.
gets up, if they're going to show you a home, then when they get up out of their chair, that meter is running. And when they get back in their chair, it stops. So not only are you paying for the actual time with the attorney looking at property, but you're paying for the travel and the expenses that they have to and from.
So what you're telling me, Art, is that attorneys are going to charge you a retainer fee, and perhaps when that retainer fee is drained, they're also going to charge me an hourly rate, and they're also going to charge me for their expenses, maybe their mileage rate between their office and the home they're about to show, and then their mileage between the home they showed back to their office, and maybe any expenses they incur between there and then. And what comes to mind, Art, do licensed attorneys have access to the MLS?
They don't, unless they pay an MLS fee. And quite frankly, I'm not sure whether they can get access to it there. They're going to have to join the board like we do.
Absolutely. They'll have to become members of the NAR, the Texas Realtor Association, and pay their membership to the MLS just like any other real estate provider or any real estate agent in the state of Texas.
And don't you think they'd run that cost over to their clients?
And that cost will probably be relayed over to their clients or anybody they're representing. Do you think that means that if they don't have access to the MLS, they probably don't have the luxury of having a super key or the availability to open up a super lockbox, will they?
I would think that would severely limit the homes that they could show.
Absolutely. So I think the cost associated with hiring attorneys isn't all what it appears to be, and it's not as simple as it appears to be. And of course, anytime a buyer can say, well, I can see the home myself. Again, listing agents don't always have the time to go out there and show their properties. If you're being represented by attorney, it's your representative's duty to show you that property because they're representing you, not the listing agent's duty to show you that property. So I think we have a lot of problems. If you hire an attorney, great. Attorneys review contracts. They're good at reviewing contracts. That's what attorneys do. But then there's a lot of things. Those costs can go up really quick, really fast. They don't have access to the MLS. They don't have the tools and systems we have as professional sales agents and as realtors that can help justify the purchase of a home and make sure you're purchasing a home at the right price versus an inflated price. And that's why we're going to protect your interests. Wouldn't you agree?
That's it. And I'd also say that keep in mind as we go through the transaction, let's say you use an attorney. If we go through the transaction in that fashion, the attorney is going to be responsible for watching your option fee, your option time, your days to get the survey out to the title company.
Yep.
They're going to be responsible for getting the resale certificate and get that expense coordinated. And all those charges are going to be billed to you.
That's exactly right.
They're all going to be billed to you. So that's not going to be a very inexpensive way to go. I will say this, they do know how to fill out the contract, and that part would be done properly.
Yep.
But watching the timeline so that the transaction goes as expected and you move into your home on time, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, and an attorney might not have the resources at hand that say, okay, here's a list of inspectors that you can hire. Here's a list of, maybe appraisers. Here's a list of repair people. Here's a list of, engineers that can inspect the foundation of a property or something of that nature. So my point is attorneys don't have the resources and the ability to do things that we have as realtors and the services we provide as part of our overall value proposition. And I think that's another reason to do the fourth option that any buyer has, and that's hire a professional sales agent, a realtor, and that could be you or me or Art, anybody here that's a professional. When you hire us, there's a lot that we do and our value proposition to help you purchase a home, and we protect your interests. And again, we have a fiduciary duty to our buyers to represent you in your best interest to get you the best deal as possible.
I think that's just an excellent point. And that is the easier way to go, believe me. Having the ability to make a phone call or give you a list of contractors to take and add to the transaction to get the repairs done, get the home inspected, and get those people out there scheduled and on time so that you can move into your home when you expect to move in. Those dates and times are critical as we move through the transaction, and we know the process. We deal with it every day. We don't spend our time in court. We don't spend our time with litigation. We're looking to spend our time with you.
Exactly right. And, and one of the things that's a positive about hiring a real estate professional is, our normal fee is a percentage, usually a percentage of the sales price. And like we've been doing for ever since real estate has been around, ever since there's been a National Association of Realtor, our fee has always been negotiable between the client and between us. It's always negotiable. And the good thing about the buyer and the buyer's agent, our fee's negotiable. Now, and here's the point. A lot of times buyers will come to you and say, I can't afford to pay your fee. Well, historically, in the state of Texas, buyers' brokers have been paid by the seller's broker, have been paid their fee. And so one of the things you can do as an agent to establish your value proposition and to make your buyer feel a little bit more comfortable is you can show them right now, and I'm talking about right now, April of 2024, you can show your buyer a list of properties you're going to go see today. And let's say you have a list of 10 properties. Probably 9 of them have some type of compensation being paid to the buyer's broker. And you can give your buyer the choice. Hey, look, we can go see these 9 properties where the seller's broker's paying my broker a commission or a fee, a percentage of the sales price. And we don't have to go see this 10th one that's not paying my fee. But if you want to go see this 10th one, you may have to pay my fee. In other words, you're going to leave that choice with your buyer. The buyer will now have a choice to either go look at property where the fee is paid by the seller or where they might have to pay your fee. Do you think that's reasonable, Art?
Sure, and they've always had that choice, haven't they?
Absolutely.
I mean, this is not a change. This is not a change. The buyers have always had that choice, and we expect that to continue. We expect to be more diligent in displaying our value to you.
Yep, and I think one of the most important things you can do right now as a buyer's agent, and it's so important, and as part of the settlement, one of the things, first of all, we got to do as real estate agents as in the state of Texas is always explain the information about brokerage services whenever we have a substantive discussion of real estate. So if we're going to show a home, you better explain that IABS form to a prospect, okay? And the second thing we need to do before we open the door is get that buyer representation agreement signed. And when we explain that buyer representation agreement to any buyer we deal with, that's the perfect time to establish your value and to explain your value and the services you provide to the buyer so they understand the services you provide and why you're worth the fee you're charging. Because guess what? People gladly pay the fee when they understand what you're buying. One of the things I think we've done poorly as an industry on the buyer side is we haven't explained to buyers in the past all the services we provide as buyer's agents. And so we have to be, and one of the things I like to always say is we're the best PR firm we can hire. We have to brag about ourselves as buyer's agents and explain throughout the process all the things we're doing on behalf of our clients, on behalf of our buyer clients, so they understand what we're doing on their behalf to bring the transaction to a close and how we're earning our fee along the way. In other words, the perception right now and prior to all this is that we wrote a contract, we go to closing and pick up a check. That's not what we do.
That's correct. If you look at the buyer's agent responsibility versus an attorney in that same situation, the attorney is going to give you a contract to sign that will have their hourly fee in there. They will have the expenses that they expect to get reimbursed from, and they'll have their retainer listed in that contract that you're going to sign before anything happens. So this is no different to have an agreement signed as a buyer's representation agreement signed on our behalf so that you know exactly what you're paying for or not going to be paying for.
That's exactly right. And like I said earlier, it's so important now for us to spend a lot of time up front establishing our value. And how do we establish? The best way to establish value is by asking a lot of questions, spending time asking questions to your buyer prospect that becomes your buyer client once they sign that buyer representation agreement, but spending time asking them questions and showing them and demonstrating how you're going to help them, first of all, find the right home, negotiate the right price, make sure they're not overpaying for that home, and then walk them through the process of going from under contract to closing, and then post-closing, what you're going to do to help them after closing, and then continue with that and be their real estate professional for life. And that is the key to building value proposition with a buyer, and that's a key to eventually making that buyer a seller when they decide to sell their home and move on to bigger and better things in the future. And again, that's how we have them clients for life, and that's how we build a successful real estate practice.
One of the things I really like about where we work, Alan, is the fact that we have a 10-step buyer process.
Exactly.
And following that process allows us to build the relationship with the buyers and an opportunity for us to show our value. Those questions are defined so that it will help us understand what it is you're looking for, what your time frame is, and how we go about helping you through the transaction. Like Alan said earlier, inspectors, repair people, other inspectors if you're looking at a new build,
That's
maybe
exactly right.
new home purchase, construction purchase. All those things are talked about in the 10-step process that we use.
Yep, and just again, we're the eyes and ears of the real estate community. We're the eyes and ears of the real estate industry. We're the experts in the business, and that's what we provide. We're providing you our expert opinions on a real estate transaction, whether it's a pre-owned home or a new construction or it's commercial real estate, farm and ranch, whatever it might be. We're going to provide and have a fiduciary duty to you as a buyer and represent you well. But first of all, whatever type of real estate transaction we're dealing with, we have to establish our value. And once we establish our value, we do that by, again, asking a lot of questions, engaging with the prospect, making them our client, and they'll gladly pay our fee. When you engage, and think about this, when you do business with your CPA and you pay them to do your taxes, you do so because they've sat and asked you questions about your business. They've sat and asked you questions about your lifestyle. And guess what? They're the expert. You pay them because they know how to do their job. When you deal business with an attorney for other things, you're paying them because they know how to do their job. They're the expert. If you consult with a physician, they're the expert. We're no different. We're the experts in real estate. People are going to consult with us. They're going to hire us because of our value. And when we establish value, we deliver value, they're going to pay our fee because we're worth it. Don't use the F word. Free.
Correct.
Don't use the F word.
And that is the F word in our business. Our services are not free, and there's
they
value.
never were free.
And they never were. They never were, and they've always been paid, and we expect that to continue. It's up to us to convey the value. So when we look at the reasons why sometimes our industry has a black eye, it's been our own failure to present what it is that we do on both sides of the transaction.
That's absolutely correct. The hardest thing to do is present our value. The easiest thing to do is establish our value. And when we establish value early and we get into the habit of explaining our value to the buyers will pay our fee. When people understand that they're buying value, they're going to pay the fee, and they know that we're worth it. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of leave it here for today. This is we wanted to talk and kind of get started into the buyer options. What we want to talk about in our next podcast is some of these value propositions that Art and I kind of were leading into, and that'll be the subject for the next podcast. A good idea, Art?
Sounds like an outstanding progress that we're making. I think we're taking it one at a time.
That's right. We're going to take it step by step. So the next podcast, tune in to our next podcast, because we're going to talk about these value propositions. We're going to talk about these 10-step programs. We're going to talk about the value of a seller's agent and a buyer's agent and why you should hire us if you're a buyer or a seller looking to be to hire a sales agent as your representative. So, Art, why don't you tell people how to subscribe and tune in?
Well, you can probably see that right below or on the
Right
screen
below.
somewhere. You can please like our podcast, subscribe, tune in for future sessions, and we look forward to seeing you on our next podcast.
Absolutely. Tune in to Knowing Real Estate with the Pozzi Group. Subscribe, hit like. We look forward to seeing you next time when we talk about the value propositions more specifically. Thanks a lot for tuning in today. We'll see you soon.
Take care.